Strixhaven with Rogue Deck Builder here with this week's episode of the Tuesday Brewsday. Again, I haven't played much of Historic. I know there was a Historic ban, as well as Standard is still the same old. So last week we did the Commander League, where I show the Exodus deck. Now I want to show the other one that I opened up in the Commander League. You can go and look at the full explanation of how we play Commander League here at the store on my last video. Very, very fun. It is my favorite way to play Magic the Gathering, especially Commander. The TLDR with that is I think the Commander has just been pushed and pushed and pushed where the power level is just not where I want it to be in like a casual type setting with playing with people. I am still a limited player at heart and a brewer at heart, so when you can combine a limited experience with a brewing experience and still even have a fun little multiplayer, more casual than competitive environment, that's where you hit my sweet spot. So for me, Commander League is where it's at. We've had a lot of fun doing so. You can go and check out that video of how we got the league started. This is our third league. We did one with Commander Legends, and then we did one with Kaldheim, and now we are on to Strixhaven. We'll be doing it with, probably going to skip Modern Horizons because I don't want everyone to be broke, but then we'll move on to Forgotten Realms with the next Commander League that we play. So, Exodus was my last Commander. This is my other one, which is Jadzi. Now, I don't particularly like to play Jadzi as much because this is just a cancerous of all cancerous commander, and especially in League where it just makes so many bad cards extremely good. This card has million minute turns too. It takes forever for you to go through a turn because you're just casting so many spells in one turn. And it's very fun for other players just to watch you play Magic while they sit and just wait and wait and wait for you to kind of go off with Jadzi. So if you're not familiar with what Jadzi does, the backside's actually relevant. I have cast the backside before, but typically only if I have a flooded hand full of lands. It says you may put 8 or more land cards from your hand on the battlefield. Then if you control 8 or more lands, you may discard a card. If you do so, return Journey of the Oracle to its owner's hand. So you can discard a card. You can basically, if I say I have 4 lands in my hand, I played a land drop on my 4th turn, you can cast Journey of the Oracle, drop your other card that's in your hand, discard a card, and then return it back, and then you're ready to cast Jadzi on the next turn. And getting a quick Jadzi out is super relevant in this because this card just takes over the game. It has a discard a card to return it to your hand, so you can protect it from spells or from removal. And then it's got the Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you can reveal the top card of your library if it's an on-land card. You may cast it by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost. If it's a land card, you just put it on the battlefield. So either or, you're going to get a lot of value out of Jadzi, where you can just go crazy in one turn by casting a ton of spells, adding more mana with all the lands you hit, and just, like I said, going pretty nuts with this card. So that is basically the... it's just a dot commander. If you pull it in your league, it's going to be a powerful, powerful card. So the dot thing's the first thing that you use in Jadzi is every ramp spell viable. We are down to 2 cards in league, so I only have 2 copies of each of these cards that I opened up in my box. The first one being Field Trip. This one is the best one in the deck because not only does it ramp you, it also goes and learns. So with Jadzi, it doesn't matter what you cast. Typically, you just go get Environmental Sciences out of the sideboard, and then you can cast Environmental Sciences, and that can actually trigger off Jadzi. Or if you're looking to ramp into Jadzi, Field Trip's going to give you a land. Environmental Sciences is also going to give you a land towards getting to your 8 lands you need to cast Jadzi. And again, late game, it's really good because it gives you a trigger off Jadzi, as well as it still gives you a learn card that will give you another trigger off Jadzi. So very, very good card. We have 2 of those. The next one I'm having in here is a Gift of Paradise. I prefer like another ramp spell as far as just an instant or sorcery because it just does not trigger Magecraft. However, ramping is so important in this deck, and this does have a synergy with another card. I'll show it right here with the Kelpie Guide. Kelpie Guide can untap target permanent control, so if it's a land that has a Gift of Paradise hooked up to it, you're going to be able to add 4 mana off that land in 1 turn. So that's also a relevant kind of combo synergy we have in the deck. Kelpie Guide I'm considering as a ramp card because typically we're just using this to untap another land that we control. Once you do have 8 or more lands though, then we can start tapping down stuff, and that's also super relevant with certain commanders. There are some commanders that do try to one-shot you in this format, like I can't even think of the name of the black-white Dragon is one of them that tries to get up to commander damage and just one-shot you with double strike. So Kelpie Guide can be very relevant against that. So this little combo is kind of cool. Speaking of another combo we have in this deck is Fertilid, and we'll get to another card here in what I consider my win cons. But Fertilid has a combination with this Carrick Wrangler. So if it gets a +1/+1 counter, you can put a +1 counter on Wrangler, and you can keep removing stuff just to keep ramping up. This is a very greedy, mana-intensive commander, so you want to be getting as many lands out as possible. Also, by diluting your deck of hitting lands off the top is also going to continue to keep going once you have Jadzi going. So Fertilid's a great card for that. Speaking of other cards that ramp us out, we have the Fairhaven Elf. Again, I'd prefer a spell to do this, but it's not terrible to just have a 1/1 blocker, chump blocker out, and then you can go get a land into the battlefield tap. So we have the Fairhaven Elf, there's 2 of. I was able to fortunately open up 2 of those in Commander Legends. One of my strategies I have with this league is you're allowed to get any pack in the History of Magic as long as we sell it. We even allow you to do theme booster packs for the league. So one of my things that I immediately start buying is Commander Legends for your pack per week or your pack every 3 losses, because that allows you to then get a lot of the mana rocks as well as some key commander cards like Fairhaven Elves in here. They have, again, Fertilid is a card you can get there. You see I have a Fertilid from a Jumpstart. I also have a Fertilid from a Commander Legends, so that's how I got those. And you can even get cards like 3 Visits, which is also a pretty powerful card in this deck. So the one thing about Strixhaven is we do have a lot of ramp spells. Emergent Sequence is a pretty good ramp spell. We got 2 of these. It just goes and gets a land on the battlefield, and it becomes a creature. That's fine. Becomes a liability for creature removal. But if someone wants to use a creature removal spell on Emergent Sequence, that's fine. It does happen to get hit by board wipes, though. So I would prefer like a Rampant Growth over this thing, but it's fine. It's something that is not a bad card to ramp into Jadzi. Our best card probably in the deck is going to be Cultivate. Of course, getting a card in your hand and one on the battlefield tapped is pretty good. It's going to get us there for Jadzi. We have 2 of those from our set booster box. Did open up a Ravnica Allegiance theme booster to specifically get Growth Spiral. And did get the Growth Spiral out of that. So we do have 1 Growth Spiral. Another one of these creatures that also goes and gets a land is the Quandrix Cultivator. It's a great little chump blocker early. It can then go and get you a land on the battlefield, help ramp you towards Jadzi. And we do want some creatures to take over the game. I'll show you some of my win conditions. So I do need to be attacking it eventually. I need to be grinding out my opponents with just sheer value. So having something to ramp and still be a creature is ideally what we want to be in this deck. So speaking of Commander Legends, Command Sphere, ignore this little set here. I opened up a Command Sphere in one of the packs and then had to go get a proxy because I want it in both Extus and in Jadzi. So that's why that's there. We also got a Sisay's Ring, which is a very mana greedy deck, and also a Simic Locket. So those are going to be helping us ramp into Jadzi. Again, I prefer spells to do it, but artifacts are also okay. Sisay's Ring's another thing that can actually combo with the Kelpie Guide to generate more mana. And we do have 1 Simone. I did open up another one, so I could add 2 in my deck if I wanted to. However, I think 1 is the right number. This is legendary. You don't want multiples in your hand. Allows you to start putting cards from your hand on the battlefield tapped. And this 4 draw card is fine too. You can start activating this once you have 8 lands. You're going to get up to 8 lands very quickly, and you can start drawing 2 cards. And if you can't get Jadzi out safely, it at least allows you to do something. It's kind of the name of the game of Jadzi. Is I don't want to run it into a counter spell or removal spell without being able to protect it. Typically, I want Jadzi out with even more mana than I cast it with. So you got to think of Jadzi as like a 10 mana spell or 11 mana spell at that point, so I can get some immediate triggers off of Jadzi. So therefore, it's got the value. And then if they remove it, then it's fine. You can just discard a card, return it back to your hand, and then rinse and repeat for the next turn. So there's the ramp. That is the first most important thing in this deck. The next is going to be the cantrips. So we want to be running any low mana cost spells that also draw you a card or replace their cards. So the first one is Incubation to Incongruity. This is both a kind of a cantrip plus removal spell. Can exile creature give exile creature and its control gets a 3/3. That's relevant for dealing with anything on the board, any commander at that point on the board that's giving you problems. But the incubation, look at the top 5 cards of your library, you may reveal a creature card from among them, put it in your hand. That is pretty relevant. We do have quite a few creatures. It could definitely miss, but as your library gets thinned and thinned, it's going to be able to hit more often as you've hit the lands out of your deck. So I do prefer incubation. I mean, early is going to be incongruity. After Jadzi, you're going to be running incubation, which is usually the opposite of what happens. Is typically most times you play this card, it's going to be early, it's going to be incubation, late, it's going to be incongruity, but it's kind of swapped in this particular deck. We just have a crash through. This is fine, especially if you have Jadzi out. This can actually be a win condition, as you saw with the Carrick Wranglers. You can get a creature huge. Typically, sometimes you have to get through, and so the charge through is going to give it trample. So you'd be surprised how big your creatures can get in this one. Adventurous Impulse, this one's actually really good because it's creature or land. So of course you're going to be casting it early and late. It's a nice little Jadzi trigger. Same thing to Open the Gates. It just goes and gets you a land. Sure, it's just fine. First turn, go and gets a land. Typically, you don't want this in like a 2-color deck. This is typically you want in like a 3, 4, 5-color deck. However, with the Jadzi triggers, any sort of cantrip is fine. Getting a basic land out of your deck and then hitting a trigger off with Open the Gates is fine. We have Eureka Moment. You draw 2 cards and put a land on from in your hand on the battlefield. Great thing to do on ideally after a turn 2 ramp into a turn 3 Eureka Moment. It's great. We have Curate, just a nice little cantrip. By looking at top 2 cards, put one in your hand, and then or any number of them back on top of your library or in your graveyard. Then draw a card. With Una's Grace, this one's super powerful. Allows you to use any lands you have in your hand to then. And I'll be showing you a card too that's going to fill your deck full or hand full of lands. Plus all your draw cards are going to be drawing lands as well. It allows you to retrace this with Una's Grace. I got this out of Eternal Masters pack. This is where I kind of splurged. We have 2 Solve the Equations. This one's great to go get some of our finishers here or anything we need in the moment. And of course triggers Jadzi. Tezzer's Gambit. This one's kind of cool because of Proliferate. This is something I think I might start adding some more with the Spark because putting some explosive counters on some creatures is pretty good. If you can spread them around with the Carrick Wrangler and then Proliferate, that's a way you can actually get through. So I think Tezzer's Gambit is very good in this deck. We have a Pop Quiz. This is a 2-for-1. You draw a card and learn instant speed. So any sort of 2-for-1 is going to be great. With Jadzi, Preordain is of course a staple. We have Opt, just a worse Preordain. Anticipate. We have 2 of them with Anticipates, which again is just going to cantrip us, trigger Jadzi. And if we hit these early, they just cantrip. That's all they do early. They help set you up to find your ramp spells and whatnot. So pretty good early game with the cantrip spells. Now we do have some control in this deck. I have prioritized Jadzi ramp cantrips over control. The Aether Helix is pretty good to get a permanent back from your graveyard to your hand, and you can return a permanent card to its owner's hand. Is Sorcery Speed kind of awkward with this card, but I feel it's still pretty good. So the only counter spells I like in this is with other modes. Then if you hit them off Jadzi, you can still do something. So to decide to denial is kind of cool because you can counter spell unless you pay 3 non-creature spell, or you can fight a creature. So if you hit this off Jadzi and you have a big creature out, at least you can do something with it. One of the things when I was running like Negates or Whirlwind, whatever the card's called, you can hit those off Jadzi and they just kind of get stuck because you have nothing to do with them. And so you can't hit the sequence. So one of the things I didn't explain is Jadzi triggers Jadzi. So whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's an online card, you may cast it. So you're casting it. And then if it's going to be an instant sorcery, it will hit Magecraft. So you can chain Jadzis over and over and over and over. If you hit those counter spells, it's just a feels bad man situation where then you have a counter spell on top of your library and then can't really, your chain empties at that point, or you have to figure out a way to draw a card at that point, and you just wasted a trigger. So something that decides to denial allows you to continue that chain going, where you can then fight a creature and then cast another spell, cast another spell, cast another spell. We have the Tempted by the Auric. Don't know how I feel about this card because typically there isn't a lot of good things you can get. Yeah, I guess there is some decent cards. But I swear every time I've played this, it's been in a pretty empty board and hasn't really got anything. So this just gains control of a creature or a planeswalker that a player controls as mana value 3 or less. So for each opponent, of course, it's better in Commander. It's basically a 3-for-1. You're going to grab 3 things from your opponents and then Yeah, so I think it's pretty good though, to especially turn 4 just to stabilize. You take away your opponent's boards, give you something to stabilize with, and then you can safely get to Jadzi. We have a Resculpt, again, pretty decent. You can exile an artifact or creature, and it gets a 4/4 blue-red elemental creature token, which is going to be quite pitiful against when you have Jadzi out. Run away together. There's a cool combo that I'll show later. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. So I like this bounce type effect because we do have some ETB effects, as you saw with some of our cards here. Or later on, I'll show you my better ETBs on creatures. So divide by 0 again. Return a creature. Return a spell or a permanent value. So again, this can be sort of like a counter spell, at least. It returns it back, so you waste their mana. And you get a learn. So I have 2 of these divide by 0s. And we have a Supreme Will. Same thing. It can counter a spell unless it plays 3, or it can cantrip. So those are the type of cards you want in Jadzi. So there's our kind of control element. Let's get on to some of the creatures that also have abilities. I have 2 Gnarled Professors. This is a 5/4 for 4 mana and learns. So good little chump blocker early, or it can get in there for some damage early. And it's also a great thing to put the Carrick Wrangler on because it does have trample. And there's one other card too it works well with, I'll show in a minute. And then we have the Quandrix Apprentice. This helps fill your hand up with lands, as well as, get rid of them out of your library. We have 2 of those, because every time you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, you may reveal the top 3 cards of your library and put a land from among them into your hand. And we have the Archmage Emeritus. I actually don't know how I feel about this card because we're already really good at drawing cards. And so I've actually drawn out because of this guy. So we'll have to wait and see if I actually want to keep the Archmage Emeritus. It's just a very powerful card. If you don't have Jadzi out, it's going to make all your ramp spells draw you a card. Typically does get eaten by removal quite quickly. I don't know why this card triggers opponents so much, because I guess you're drawing a ton of cards, but yeah, it is hard to keep alive in this deck. So again, that's why I don't know how I feel about the Archmage Emeritus, but it does have some massive synergies with Jadzi of keeping your hand full, but I found it's like overkill. You have too many cards in your hand because of Jadzi. Let's go on to a kind of the couple of flex cards. I did open up a Lane Light of Anticipation, and I think this card is very good in this deck because it gives flash, and so then you can cast Jadzi at instant speed at the end of your opponent's turn. That way, then if they do something like counter it or whatnot, then you can untap and still, do something on your turn. So it also makes all your sorcery spells, which are plentiful, like all of your ramp spells, be available to cast on your opponent's turns rather than on your turn. So you can go off on Jadzi on other people's turns or on your opponent to your right's turn or end of turn, rather than have to worry about holding up counterspell mana or whatnot. So I do like this card in the deck. This Primal Command is very, very necessary. Shuffle your library is huge. Shuffling my library back in, you go through 100 cards in this deck quite easily. Gaining 7 life is not that relevant. Putting a non-creature permanent on top of someone's library is okay. That actually can combo with Jadzi if you need another ETB effect to happen. But usually you're going to be searching for a creature card, and shuffling your library is usually what I do. And there are some good creatures you can get with the Primal Command. So I'm glad I opened up this card. It's actually one of the glues that keeps this deck together. So let's go on. We've already talked about the Carrick Wranglers. Let's talk about some of the win cons. So we have the Wranglers. Those are really good. I've got this Spitting Image. This is a super good card with Retrace. Create a token that's a copy of target creature. This is super good because look, create a token that's a copy of target creature. So I have copied the Witherbloom Dragon multiple times. I've copied the 5/5 Flying Vigilance Haste Dragon that reveals the top cards of your library before. I've copied Opposing Wandering Archaics before with this Spitting Image. This is a super good card. It's a great win condition. It has a lot of synergy here with the Quandrix Apprentice late game. You have a ton of mana, and between those two, the Spitting Image and the Apprentice, you're going to be able to cast this over and over and over again and copying the best things that are out there. So very, very good card in this deck. We have the combo that I played in Commander Legends League, with the Brindle and the Moon Kraken, which whenever you cast a spell with 6 or greater, you can turn it on then permanent to your owner's hand. And these two. Late game, you have a lot of mana, and if your opponents have tried to keep Jadzi down, you're going to have tons of mana just to loop these multiple times in a turn. So you can cast like Skull of the Ages, bring back a couple cards, put Meteor Golem back in your hand, cast Meteor Golem, return back Skull of the Ages with the Brindle effect, because it does say you get to return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. with anything of convert mana cost 6 or greater. So these have a good little looping effect. It's also something neat you can hit off Jadzi. You don't keep the chain going, but at least you get these really good cards out of it with a Meteor Golem that can take care of anything. And I mean, this is just a good 6/8 card that's going to be able to start bouncing things, start bouncing your own stuff. This is going to be super, super good. Speaking of Wandering Archaic, this card is just insane. It works with Jadzi because the copies triggers off Jadzi. It also triggers off your like Archmage or Quandrix because copies are something that is part of Magecraft. And it just really taxes your opponents, and then you can start just going crazy with all their spells with the Wandering Archaic. So really, really cool card. Glad I opened this guy. Last one we have is a Bookworm. Bookworm is a 7/7 for 8, so we want to be hitting this off of Jadzi, but it's also got this cool ability of put it from your graveyard into your library for 3rd from your top. So you can actually you can make this go back to your library and getting in with Jadzi. Gains 3 life. You draw a card. It's a 7/7 trampler. It's exactly what you want it to be. Now the two main win cons in my deck, I would say Spitting Image is super good. So is the Scholar of the Ages. But the two main win cons, one's going to be, at least for one opponent, is exponential growth. When I'm ready and I have a Gnarled Professor out or any other, there are a lot of times even like a Fairhaven Elf can get the job done with exponential growth. You just double everything's power a billion times, and typically it is off of like a Carrick Wrangler or something, or like I said, one of our Tramplers, and we can double it a bunch of times and then swinging for lethal against one opponent. So exponential growth is pretty good. It's kind of weird though. I honestly wish I had a better win con here or a justification to actually cut this card, because there are many times you hit this off the top of your library and you can still cast it for just 1, but it just doesn't do anything because you can't pump the X into it. The other one though is so good. I'm glad I opened up this Jumpstart. Got the +1/+1 Jumpstart deck, and this is Primeval Bounty. So whenever you cast a creature spell, you get a 3/3, and Jadzi is casting things off the top of your library. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it puts 3 +1/+1 counters into a creature, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, the creature will gain 3 life. There have been a couple games already that I've been down to really, really low, and then Jadzi comes out, and I hit a bunch of lands off the top of the library, and at least that allows me to stabilize because you gain 9, 15 life in one turn with this, and then you're good to go. This spits out a bunch of creatures. Again, with this looping of the Scholar of the Ages, the Meteor Golem, it's going to allow you to continue to get 3/3s out. And so this is our big win con for basically finishing off the game. Other than that, I haven't really opened up many, like, I did have some other tap lands. The only tap lands are under the 2 Quandrix campuses because they do have the Scry ability, but in all honesty, I don't know if I really like these. Green is super good at fixing. You don't want anything coming into play tapped because you want to be spending your mana every turn, and so the rest of it's just basics. And I believe I run quite a few basics, like 38 in here, or 36 plus these 2. So it's a very intense, mana-intensive deck, but mana is something you could easily go up to 40, 42 and still feel justified with Jadzi. I even felt like even going up to like 40, even higher, because if you have a lot of lands in your hand, doing this backside of Jadzi isn't the most terrible effect to then ramp it out a little bit earlier. So either way, that's what makes Jadzi so good in this league. When you're playing with worse cards than typically you would find in a regular Commander game, because people, especially when this is brand spanking new, Jadzi just makes every bad spell really, really good. And so I prefer Exodus. Exodus is more my cup of tea. I wish I had another commander or two that I could. The reason I kind of got lazy with this one, I used to build like every eligible legendary creature. I would, any overlap between the cards, I just proxy the cards and then use those cards for the other ones, because I have some interesting legendary dragons that I could make. But for this league, I've only built 2 commander decks, so these 2. So Exodus, you can go back and see last week's Tuesday Brews for Exodus, or and then I guess you're looking at this one for Jadzi if you're interested in that Exodus deck. So there you have it. There's my overview of Jadzi. Should be interesting to play as a regular commander. Again, I don't touch commander. I just think that it's lost its luster. It's become too many haymakers. Like, again, my whole issue with historic, standard, the way Magic design has been going is they can continue to print haymakers. And I don't like playing haymaker Magic. I like playing tit for tat Magic. I like responding to spells, playing a lot of creatures, attacking with a lot of things, compiling a bunch of synergies, and grinding your opponent out. And historic, with casting one spell win the game, with standard right now being riddled with either like mono white has a super good curve. Rogues just can grind you out, but a lot of times it's just things about sequences, whether the deck is strong or not, whether you get that first turn ruin crap or not. And then you even have even worse decks to face against, like the Embercleave spam or the Emergent Ultimatum, which are just, they really, it's either those or bust on the right turn, and just do not like Haymaker Magic. So this is really fun. Still playing Magic, still having a lot of fun with Magic with these leagues. Still play Sealed, still play Draft. But I know the lack of brews is disheartening to some people, but it's just the stage of the life I'm in with Magic, and hopefully they swing it back around. Hopefully we can get some power resets, and we can get design focusing more on synergy again, rather than making clear winners to sell packs in a set, or printing haymakers. And I wish they'd tone down with Commander, but Modern Horizons has shown us they're not going to. I think it was Saffron Olive that just tweeted out that he wished that they would quit designing cards he just felt like you had to play in Commander because they were so good. So it's like, well, I'm playing green-blue. This is going in my deck no matter what, because it's just strictly better than everything else. And the more cards that are printed, I think the narrower and narrower Commander is going to be as far as what cards will be put in a deck. And it's I know you don't have to play Commander that way, but that's what ends up happening. So even if you don't adhere to those rules or those standards, other people will, and that doesn't create an even playing field or whatever. So anyway, this is my 2 cents with that. Having a lot of fun with this league. I highly encourage you to start your own similar type league or way to play Magic. There's better things out there than just Standard or Historic or Modern or whatever these formats that everyone or Wizards wants you to focus on. There's just better ways to play. Kitchen table is where it's at. Finding your own ways to play. And that's what makes the beauty of Magic, because it's limitless with what you can do. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.